So I guess we got, what is it? 2, 3, 4 grand final rematches. Curious. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial and Clearing Vision MSI 2023. If you're new here, my name is Sam. I've watched every single playoff of every participating region in MSI, except for winter, for reasons I've mentioned in previous videos. We're going to be talking about what is essentially week 2, i.e. the starter bracket, round 1 upper and lower bracket, and round 2 upper bracket. A couple of things that are super notable, including how I don't like how this format essentially gave us the least amount of international matchups we could want. Oops. But that we have at least some very interesting games that were played and will be played going forward. Other particular notable things, we say goodbye to 2 teams. Bye to Golden Guardians and goodbye to Mad Lions. 2 teams that were very exciting and had a lot of promise to them, but them's the ropes. We gotta say goodbye to some people. Hopefully they'll come back at Worlds. They'll be really cool. But their play itself and the plays of every particular team so far has just shown me that no one other than G2 Gaming is probably going to get the crown. But for now, let's take a look at the particular games in question. Take it away, past me. It's the bracket stage at MSI, round 1, first match. We got G2 Esports versus Gen.G. I'm going to be quite honest. After game 2, I thought this series was going to be a total stomp. Okay? Vision, coordination, neutral, siege, just any and every aspect. Gen.G had their number, leaving just G2 to play very slow and reckless across the board. And by all means, right? The series solidifies in my mind that I was kind of right about my expectations for G2 overall. Now that said, Gen.G start to play just as reckless in Game 3 and has me baffled by the kinds of priorities they hold. I'm not a fan of either team's draft priorities, nor their approach to the early game, leaving them holding they have early game drafts, but mid to late game priorities and playstyles. Now, G2 finally got the right call with Game 3's draft, but both sides need to either focus and play to their win conditions that they draft for or opt for new compositions that fit their style. Because today it looked like there was a lost kid that was fighting the Globetrotters that were just trying out a bunch of new strats. It was just like, cool, it's really cool to see that, but the kid got a basket they shouldn't have. My MVP of the series is Chovy, who managed to be the most consistent player on stage despite the fact that his Game 3 performance, what was that game? And we're in the round 1 upper bracket. Mad Lions versus T1. So, Mad completely choked at that point, right? Yeah. Honestly, the first 15 minutes of the series looked incredible by Mad, fully playing into their draft conditions, especially the ones they needed. But after that, they just avoided all of their win conditions, making this abundantly clear that the European teams are not prepared for the level of coordination that is going to come out of the LCK and LPL. The lack of vision, overzealous approach, lack of understanding of their win conditions, generally falling apart game after game after game. And Game 1 led to such a consistent and dismantling from T1, who, by the by, did not play the series cleanly either, right? Roughed, rushed, and generally using drafts that are very difficult to execute with the assumption that they'll outperform automatically. The second, however, that T1 picked a simple, focused, and scaling draft, they finished the game in 17 minutes, and it was kind of hard to tell if it was either because of a lack of morale from Mad Lions or because the drafts being way too early game dependent from Mad just made it difficult to even answer, or if T1 had just gotten warmed up at that point and just to scale. Just either way, the combo gives us such a dominant showing, and now there's going to be 2 playoff rematches on their way for round 2 upper and round 1 lower. My MVP of this series goes to Keria, who did everything under the sun to guarantee Gumayusi had as much uptime as possible while enabling and saving everyone else. And we're still in the upper bracket, round 1, Cloud9 versus Bilibili Gaming. I mean, come on. Cloud9 had the right idea, but all the wrong executions for the early game and how they adapted their drafts. I can very much appreciate that they also knew how to punish Bilibili and how to correct their own errors in the game after game after game. But honestly, no matter the coordination fix, over-aggression fix, neutral adaptation, simpler drafts, vision pivots, if you can't get the gold against a team that scales every time, then you aren't playing with a lead, you are playing with reckless abandon. Now, there would be moments where a neutral or 2 would be taken from Cloud9 and it would look nice, but then they wouldn't funnel gold into the carries or get turrets or suffocate Bilibili from that position. Just, they looked lost on how to use their tempo lead into pressure, gold, map control. It was just so infuriating because Bilibili knew that they could just rest, relax, and just wait to scale and outplay team fights from the mid to late game points. And I'm honestly just not a fan of how this series played out. If anything, to me, it shows that Bilibili haven't quite fixed their issues regarding their late game fumbles, as they fell prey to them in this series, and Cloud9 recognized this. Just, they were playing against a team that had no clue how to get gold from it. Oh my god. My MVP for this series goes to Elk, who, no matter how bad the early game went, would outdamage literally everyone each day, or each game. And we're in the upper bracket, round 1, Golden Guardians versus JD Gaming, and the Guardians give me the slightest glimpse of hope, where G2 were kind of scrappy with their 1 win. Golden Guardians with a thought of goal in every 3 games when it comes to the early game showing to outplay constantly. Now that said, the results is kind of to be expected from the strong mid to late game coordination that we find in JD Gaming. The Guardians understood the early game steps, but without pushing tempo, building or ballooning gold leads, or suffocating resources, the advantages gained meant nothing. I have hope that the Guardians will find a way further into the tourney with a little bit more and more improvements that they've been showing since playoffs. Now, JD Gaming, for their part, didn't feel like a team that was faltering. They were being outplayed, but it felt like they were biding their time, making sure to avoid losing more than needed and trading even or occasionally ahead at any given chance. Now, with that in mind, I do think that how they were always able to be rocked super early game is a sign of how other teams should approach them. But BLG attempted it in the playoffs twice and lost. LCK teams, we have Gen.G, who doesn't quite go that direction with their playstyle, and T1, who is inconsistent when they do manage to pull it off. For now, no one has shown me anything that says for sure they will take this team down. And the series solidifies that prediction for me. They're going to win the whole thing. My MVP for this series is Ruler. Everyone on this squad was coordinated, but Ruler always finds a way to outdamage everyone around. And we're into round 2 of the upper bracket and a Korean final rematch. Gen.G versus T1. And honestly, this series should have ended in 3 games, right? So kudos to Gen.G for subverting our expectations, right? Just in the losing sense. Gen.G have the uncanny eye for how to punish teams that overstep, how to create coordination and defensive vision, fantastic vision denial, and overall some very nice neutral plays. But then we got T1, who take all of that and crank it to 11, but only when they have an early lead. And even then, they might just throw the whole thing away at the last minute for potential ace instead of just ending the game or resetting for a neutral even. What frustrates me more than anything are two things. One, Gen.G's lack of proactivity in this series is unacceptable, especially after seeing how clean the play was in Game 4. And two, T1 looked like a team I believed could be the upset against JD Gaming, at least with the first two games, and the third game almost, but still, no team now has convinced me that they'll pull it off. Not after a series like that. My MVP of the series is Faker, who continuous aggression and eye for engage has managed to get T1 the leads they need for success, even if sometimes a little unorthodox. And we're in round 1, but in the lower bracket, we got ourselves Mad Lions versus G2 in the winter playoff rematch, and the winter finals rematch in the summer lower bracket round 1 rematch. And we say goodbye to Mad Lions in a way that I really hate. This series is filled with a lot of cool stuff, some interesting flexible picks that allow both teams to have angles of approach that are kind of unique to them. It's too bad that it was with a draft setup that made everything harder and exemplified the really weak performance overall. The individual skirmish and skill is pretty solid, but winds up getting them to play in a way that is overzealous and careless. The vision denial can be at times super solid, but the lack of vision control and overall shallow control sours it, making the whole process moot. It's like the blind fighting the blind. I don't see G2 moving past round 2 lower bracket with the constant mistakes that are made by almost everyone in these roles. And this is just not the best representation for the LEC. But who knows? G2 have surprised many in the past. They tend to be fairly unpredictable in international scenes. My MVP of the series is Broken Blade, who just on an individual had just like an awesome individual performance, saving the day regularly. Otherwise, it probably would have just been Hansama, who's just been consistent, but you know. And we head off into the upper bracket round 2, Bilibili Gaming versus JD Gaming. And I feel pretty bad for Bilibili, regardless of how many early game leads you take, behind or massively ahead. You face JD Gaming at about the 12-minute mark, and it's like they have a 10K gold lead on you with just an amount of coordination that most teams dream to have. Now, I could have seen more from them. Their priorities and drafts made life a little bit harder for them. The vision was not always consistent, and neutral focuses just kind of all over the place. And I could do away with the one-track mind approach to some of these fights also. JD Gaming, for their part, are not even the most consistent team in terms of either vision, neutrals, draft options, or heck, ballooning leads where needed. But again, that coordination is just so goddamn strong, and on a level that makes no sense that it should put fear to all about to face them. Now, I've mentioned a lot how no team so far has convinced me that they could take this squad down, and I doubled down on that. JD Gaming convinced me in this series they can't be taken down. My MVP for the series is Ruler, but really it's his Secret Service keeping him alive at all costs. And we head off into round 1 in the lower bracket. Golden Guardians versus Cloud9, another finals rematch. And we say goodbye to a wonderfully delightful team in Golden Guardians who wowed us. The unfortunate nature of Golden Guardians was their inconsistent approach in the mid to late game. They would show us fantastic vision, incredible early game approach, solid neutrals, but the coordination or macro choices would falter aggressively, and would wind up with a disjointed team playing several disparate win conditions that don't match the ones that they've had for their draft. Cloud9, for their part, out-coordinated on all fronts, just everywhere in this series. While they didn't quite get the early game leads in every game that would be wanted, it shows some impressive work to see them recognize regular patterns and mistakes from their opponents, or what they make at least, and adjust to play for it. I just don't like that their very late game approach is centered around Baron and Elder. No matter how big the lead is, it just led to a lot of strong avenues of attack for Golden Guardians. This leads me mostly to think that there isn't much of a chance to see Cloud9 beat Gen.G in the next round, a team that excels even more in late game coordination. But we'll see. Cloud9 has overperformed in international scenes before, so it couldn't be a shock if all of a sudden they get a larger upset than expected. My MVP for the series is Berserker, whose teamfight influence is certainly felt in every single game, but everybody was playing on high cylinders in a way that kind of disappoints. Wowee! Some of those series had me really frustrated, and for good reasons. We are expected some very top-tier talent, right? A lot of these games do show them being top-tier talent, but the only team that seems to be the consistent factor, or the most consistent team, at the very least, is JD Gaming. And in a way that's mostly terrifying from their team fight perspective. Because, quite honestly, if this was like the set of teams for Worlds, I would not be very satisfied with the competition, or at least where we were headed with this. So, with the sudden lack of competition, so to speak, what are we actually then looking for in these series? I know that for many people would be looking for an upset, or to see whether or not it is in fact going to be JD Gaming that's going to go all the way. I'm of the opinion that no matter what, it's going to be the case, but I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Or if you're really looking for an upset, for anything to justify the competition itself. Because there was murmurs of the wanting to remove emerging regions or lower tier teams from the competition in general, just to have the top four, which, mind you, has two-pronged effect. One, many of the larger regions don't have the same kind of fan base size that you think they have compared to the lower tier regions. Brazil has probably one of the biggest fan bases, and removing them completely is an utter travesty. The fact that we've already lost 3 regions between last year and this year really lessens the style of play, because believe it or not, many different styles change from how many of the lower or emerging regions approach the game, right? It is not always about playing the best way. If there's only one way you've ever known and you see another team do something interesting, you go, oh, I see what you're doing. How about we go with this? Heck, how many times have Chinese and Korean teams have told North America clearly understands what the quote-unquote best champions are in any given meta, but don't know how to play them, and so we just don't pick them up because there's no need to. There's a clear understanding that every region understands the games in different ways. And on top of it, I think it's just a travesty to the sport. If we're going to have these international competitions, it's to celebrate the sport itself, not just find the best team, right? Because then at that point you just pick whether or not you think China or Korea is the best region, and then you watch their grand finals at any given point, and you're like, aha, that's the best team. But that's not what we do. These international competitions are for a celebration of the game itself, on top of trying to find who is the best team at that patch. I don't know. the conversation online, plus the way that some of these games and the drafting of the bracket stage went off, had me thinking very much of, should we really care about the format or care more about the actual spirit of the competition? That's the question I'm posing. I care very much about the format itself, but I shouldn't care about the format so much that I think that removing more teams is the way to go to get more bang for your buck. Because no, I don't think that's the case. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. The second thing on the docket that I have today. The meta seems to have very much solidified into what looked like pretty much the playoff of everywhere else, with the little caveats of more Cossacks in Italy than I had previously anticipated. And this isn't a discussion about the meta, this is a discussion about the early game versus late game. Because the teams that do the best so far play late game incredibly well. They pick drafts that are easy to coordinate, where if they get an early lead, it snowballs and is impossible to deal with. Or if they don't, then they have a lot of avenues to work around. Or at least those are what the best drafts are. And I mean, you need to have 2 to 3 front lines. You need to have 3 forms of engage, 2 at minimum. You can't just have a bunch of poke champions or just a bunch of one target CC champions and then just go haha, we got it, and then have your AD carry just get fucked because there's not enough peel or there's not enough engage tools to really enable the player. I'm getting sick and tired of these teams playing hyper aggressive early game drafts and then just not knowing how to translate that to the next stage of the game. It is tiring. I just said to celebrate diversity and but at some point you're hitting your head against the wall, clearly not understanding how to really play this particular draft. And I guess the best example, because it's freshest in my mind, Cloud9 won that series against Golden Guardians with a very hyper poke comp. A draft that, by all means, I have seen the best of teams fuck it up very quickly. They held a 9k gold lead from minute 8, or not minute, from minute 13 or something of that sort. Minute 13 till the end of the game. That gold lead did not balloon, and you had a Golden Guardians with a draft that had a lot more agency. Now, they won mostly from a fumble on the Golden Guardians side because the Guardians had what it took for it. They had the tools, they just didn't approach it properly, leading to an Elder Dragon that they shouldn't have started, because there seems to be a fundamental lack of understanding on how to play poke comps, single target comps, as opposed to your stock standard team fighting comps, which, from the way that the draft phase goes, shows to be the meta, and yet it keeps coming up. And I swear to goodness, I cannot see another team pick an early draft, an early game draft, and not translate it properly to end. If you're focusing on neutrals, pick a draft that has neutrals in mind. If you're going to pick an early game, just don't hope that the neutrals are going to be super easy to take at that point. But those are my thoughts. Do you think that do you think that some teams are over prioritizing some early game drafts over late game, very solid stock standard drafts that would be a lot more guaranteed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Or do you think that they're fun? Just keep doing it. A lot of teams seem to be showing their set of skills from it. And by all matter, it's equally fun. I just think if you're really trying to win, why take the risk? I'd love to hear your thoughts on any and all of the subjects that I've covered so far. We have literally just 1 week left of the tournament. And it'll be a while before Worlds happens. I'd love to hear how you think things are going, your predictions, and everything. But I appreciate all of you for watching. It's been a lot of fun. I'll see you guys next week on Sunday after the grand finals. I think JD Gaming's going to win, regardless of the combination that's going to go. Even if they lose one series, it would not surprise me if they make finals and win again. It's in their wheelhouse. They're from the LPL. This is a standard format for them. Everyone, have a good time.